When you're in certain environments, you're just for a long enough time, it's hard not to have elements rub off on you.
Yeah, I think we both were working at a conservative newsletter, and I don't know if you were conservative at all before.
Definitely, I went from being like a New York, like super liberal to like really accepting a lot of narratives from like very conservative talking points. And over the course of 7 years of working in that field, it's hard not to identify in it.
Yeah, I can definitely see that.
If you're profiting, especially,
And when you're always hearing that argument, it's hard. Like, I wouldn't say that it made me more conservative. If anything, like, maybe I was really, like, a Democrat before without knowing why. Like, maybe the environment, I would know, like, some details about climate change and stuff. But most of the policies, like, I really didn't know anything about. And having to, like, defend myself, I was actually figuring out where I was standing on things. Like, I had never really even thought about.
Yeah, I think when you're young, especially if you're in a liberal area, I don't think that many of the people I encountered for years were Republican. So you could almost just talk politics in this weird way where you're just kind of agreeing with each other. You bring in some outrage, and then the other person agrees that they are outraged, and you kind of just proceed in that way. But then when somebody actually challenges it, it's a little bit harder to figure out, and you start to hear these arguments, and they seem to make sense. Mm-hmm. And next thing you know, you're marching with a pitchfork, and
you can either do that, or maybe it makes you want to like look up on it. Like a couple times, I would hear an argument, and I'd be like, "That kind of sounds like, valid. So let me look up this policy or whatever they're saying." And like half the time, it wouldn't even be close to what they were saying.
Yeah, that's the issue.
Like there's one thing of like arguing points. There's another thing of convincing the masses of one thing when it's really something else. And I think both parties do it, but I think maybe sometimes conservatives do it a little bit more.
Yeah, well, on definitely recent issues, I mean, the election stands out that there was very little evidence to support the idea that it was stolen in the manner that they said. And you have mainstream publications pushing that.
I wish Gore had done that. Honestly, I remember as a little kid being upset that Gore was just giving up so easily.
That was very upsetting. I remember having the same kind of feeling.
I don't know if it's right, but
well, we were kind of, I guess, like Clinton babies. That you had 8 years of Clinton, pretty much like the whole time understanding politics. For however much you understand that at 8, but at 10, those formative years, and then you thought, all right, Bill. Although with the blowjob thing, that kind of changed the way I thought about him at the time.
I don't even know what age I was when I found that out, but it wasn't young. It definitely wasn't young.
Did you understand what exactly they were talking about, like oral sex?
I don't think I even remember seeing that on TV or my parents talking about it. Like, my parents were political. I remember when, Bush was running, we had Bush signs, and then we had Gore signs, and then we had Kerry signs or whatever. And so I did remember some political things, but I don't remember hearing anything about the Clintons. No one talked about it. Right? I don't remember that being
See, to me, it was big. I don't know why. It was just, we were in elementary school, too. And it just seemed like everybody was obsessed with it. And
what year was that?
Was it 96? Let me see.
Because it's now strange to me that I didn't hear it. But they do say kids are on a different wavelength at an age 7 or 8
that they just don't even hear.
Like, you're just not thinking the same way as you do, like, when you're an older child or a teenager, like, when you're in those young child years.
You're not really thinking about political figures. That was 95 and through 97 was their affair, so it was a couple of years, it was a year or so after
Yeah,
that.
I should have definitely heard
It's
about
like
that.
98, 99.
I'm ashamed.
You weren't following up.
I'm ashamed, so I have no recollection.
I don't know if I really had an understanding of like what it was. I know that I was quite a few years before puberty with it, and I remember not understanding what he got on the blue dress. When you think about it, I think my mom said that he peed on her.
He didn't wash his hands, and so he had fecal matter,
Or
and it was linked to him through DNA.
Yeah, some weird stuff happening, and I just couldn't understand. I couldn't. I was like, "That's urine. I know what they're talking about. It's urine."
That's the only thing that comes out of these things.
It's baffling.
Obviously.
Kids are so silly. You have no idea. Like, people don't want to tell you because they're
That's
nervous.
probably why you were so
about
upset about it, because you thought he had peed on her, and you're like, why would he do that?
Yeah, why? But like, I knew they were Democrats, so like they weren't like mad at him that much. And I remember him going out there, and I remember watching it live when he said, "I did not have sex with that woman."
Why didn't he just admit it? See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Like, why can't we just like admit and like talk truth?
He was afraid of Hillary.
I'm sure Hillary already knew at that point.
Yeah, you have so many of these kind of situations in his history before. Like, he was notorious. He had cheated 1,000 times on her, and she knew about
But
quite a few.
if your husband wants to have sex that much, I think at a certain point you're like, go do it somewhere else. Like, I'm not taking care of that. That's not my problem. That's not my problem, Bill.
And if you're trying to focus on some, like, your political career...
Yeah, you don't have time for this horny old man.
Let him vent it out on some interns. But it's a weird story. And you imagine that this was kind of the era of having everything uncovered from people. I imagine it probably existed a great deal. Like,
she's so old, I think, well, I'm not to be like offensive.
Hillary or
Hillary, that I feel like her version of feminism is just outdated to us. And I think
maybe the second wave of feminism.
Yeah, like maybe like not caring and being possessive over your husband and like working things out and like being like your own woman in the relationship. Maybe that was super feminist for her time. We just have like higher standards now.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That it's a different generation where people accepted that behavior a little bit more with males. I guess that comes from that power dynamic. And it's interesting that she maintained that even with the, I think in some situations it makes sense that if a guy does something terrible and the woman has never worked, for instance, has just, taken care of the kids and has no way to support themselves. Like, I imagine that inspires forgiveness more than anything else.
They just have nowhere to go. My grandma was actually telling me about a young woman in her church that has like a bunch of kids, and the husband like can't even keep a job and like works at like fast food restaurants, and she can tell like that he's like hitting her, and she just like has nowhere to go. Like, what is this girl gonna do with like 5 kids? Like, this guy's barely helping, but still, like, that's more help than she can be able to lose, like risk losing at the end of the day.
Yeah. And then I've seen it, with Kelsey's work with the women's shelter, and it's wild. These people, you bring these numerous children, and then there's only a allotted time that you can stay at these kind of places, and then all of a sudden you got to get out there and kind of somehow build from nothing with 3 or 4 children.
Yeah, you don't have money to have people watch your kids.
Yeah.
you don't have a good relationship with your family so that they can watch your kids. So, like, how do you work if you have nowhere to put your kids and they're not in, like, elementary school or even kindergarten age yet?
It's rough, and you know, it's like it's one of those things that it's so why it is so important for a woman to have kind of like rights to do something.
Yeah, or you know what, you know? Like I don't want to like start going on this like pro-life nonsense or whatever about like, you know, restrictions. But I think if people are serious about wanting to stop abortions, let's stop going after the women who are feeling so trapped that they feel like they need to do that, and start finding ways, like whether it's birth control or having funding for these women, like once they do have kids, that they can get help and they don't have to get rid of it if they don't want to.
Yeah, it's not true. I think the best example of that is that the same people that hate abortions the most and are against them the most, they're also the people that don't want sex education, when sex education has been statistically proven to reduce the number of people that get pregnant in high school.
They just voted against birth control.
Yeah, so it's like you try. Like,
okay, what do you really want here? So it's obviously population, because where in the Bible did God ever say that you couldn't use protection?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what they're quoting there. I'm not sure, because they couldn't have had. Well, didn't Babylonians and stuff have? I think they would put some. They would just get some animal skin.
Yeah, they would use I think the internal organs or something.
No, does that taken under? So it's funny that these things predate germ theory.
Like sausage lining.
So you know there's something in there that causes it.
Oh, yeah.
You don't know, like, what it is.
People were dirty back then. They would use, like, certain kinds of shit or, like, manure as birth control, or as a spermicide, or, you know, like something to keep the sperm from, you know, getting them pregnant. I don't think they had a great understanding of how it works, but, yeah, they would actually put bird poop up there. I think it was done with cows. I'm not sure. Like, I watched something about it, and there's, like, a lot of nasty things that people would shove up their vaginas.
Yeah, you see, like, the ancient kind of, like, sex toys and stuff. It's wild to think about people in antiquity. They're humans. They apparently were more human than us.
People are so, like, insecure about their vaginas, but they're probably the cleanest they've ever been in the history of mankind.
Yeah, that's true. You have a lot better, because there were confident people out there at a time when they would wash once a month.
Exactly. Imagine how nasty, like, anytime you watch those, like, period pieces and you see the love scenes and, like, somebody just came back from war or, like, battle, and you're like, oh, how nasty would that really be?
This is where people, I don't think, did a lot of oral sex at that time.
Know. Sometimes they do it in the movies, so is that, like, just not accurate? We just want to see it as, like, modern pervs?
Yeah, it's funny when people do, like, these explicit scenes. I always think that it's funnier when somebody's, like, completely shaved.
Yeah. Well, just imagine how nasty their mouths were. They weren't, like, really brushing their teeth or anything. So, like, how much dirtier was it, the wiener or vagina or whatever, than the mouth of whoever was going to put it?
Yeah, probably pretty close.
I think maybe, like, worse.
Yeah, I can't imagine the smell. You know, for, like, guys and girls.
Kissing.
You know,
oh, my gosh. No.
Maybe you would eat some... I would have a few oranges, maybe, you know, try to get it, like...
Some lemon water.
Yeah, try to get it a little tangy.
Just get, like, a bunch of ash and put it in your mouth.
The active charcoal.
Yeah, I've noticed that when I use, like, the charcoal stuff to clean my teeth and I just leave it in there, it kind of seems like it kills the bacteria in your mouth, and it, like, keeps your, like, breath better.
It was pretty... I remember the first time you did it, And there was definitely like your teeth are always white, but like there was a noticeably whiter.
Yeah. They probably tell you not to do that. You're destroying your teeth.
With it. So there's something to it.
Teeth are one of those things you never know really what to do with them.
No, you try. I think we take for granted. We take for granted people like knowing how to brush their teeth properly. Yeah. Apparently, a lot of people, and even like
Who
America,
teaches us?
You know, if you have two parents that don't know how to brush their teeth, how the hell are you going to figure it out? Like, you don't go through enough detail.
How do you really know that it was done badly? Because it's hard to like really look into a little kid's mouth with those big cheeks and stuff.
When I was young, I was not getting to the back as much. Like, I would be pretty darn good with brushing, and my parents always made me brush. And I don't know, I wasn't really getting back there. So, like, all the cavities were always, like, far back. And, like, I just wasn't doing a good job with Rachel. Like, I should have had, like, a full lecture about it. Where somebody shoved the brush.
I do remember as a kid, like, those tablets that they would have you, like, chew, and it would show, like, the parts of your teeth that needed to be brushed. And that would cause me so much anxiety.
I didn't know about that. I kind of, now that you say it, have like a little bit of a recollection.
Like it would happen maybe like once a year.
Good segue.
Let me give the theories of the free braces while it's fresh in my mind. So there's like two different theories that I heard. One was that it started with like King Solomon in Jerusalem, and it was building a temple, and like the builders of the temple like developed this code system that was later used by these people who wanted to be a part of the like secret society of these temple builders, and then that's where it kind of developed from. And then there's another theory, which I think is like the more accepted one, which was it was like a medieval thing, and the Masons, like there was a boom of building castles, and so all these like skilled workers were moving around and building castles in different places, and they kind of lived like nomads, and they didn't have a certain place they would live. They would stay in these guilds, which were like men hangout spots, because all these workers were always like traveling around, and they'd hang out there while they were working somewhere, and they became like buddies. And then the experienced ones would have like these codes so that they'd know like who the good workers were that knew like all these things. And so if you were like a member of this group, then that meant that somebody had taught you the skills and that you were like more valuable.
Yeah, they weren't peasants. Like at this point,
no,
they were like
workers.
peasants. Like this is like something they took a lot of pride in.
Exactly.
And you know, it had a special role in society.
Yeah.
That it wasn't your classic just peasant.
It was so cool, in fact, that it started bringing like the philosophers around, and so these people wanted to hear like what these guys had been, because it was like a fraternity, like these hangout spots. They talk about life and all these things. Well, then these other guys wanted to join, and if they were trusted and, you know, like they seemed like a good guy.
Do you know if they talked about politics at that point? Like
no, this is when they started.
The ban on politics?
I think they started to talk about politics, and that's why they brought other people in, because they wanted like differing opinions. Like what we said earlier, like you kind of learn your opinions by debating others.
Yeah, I think, did we talk about that on video of?
I'm not sure we did. We can go over it again just in case.
But yeah, we did. Yeah, we did. I'm crazy. I got so into the dental conversation that I forgot that we had.
We just do tangents here, over there, and then somehow we always end up back.
Yeah, we figured it out.
Yeah, so these guys that started coming around were like interested in talking about life and like the universe and all these like big ideas.
No girls allowed.
Well, you know, that wasn't even a thing back then. Like that was just like a duh. No girls, like what the hell? They're like so beneath us. Anyways, not gonna be offended or anything about it.
Now you can't judge the Who knows what the heck they were thinking?
Yeah, they were probably all boning each other anyways, but...
Imagine, you wouldn't want to even be around somebody who smelled that much.
No. And there's a story from, like, the 1600s where these guys get this guy was going to uncover the Freemason secrets. And this is, like, around where what the Freemasons are now, like, what we know of them, were kind of developing. Like, kind of like a mob situation, but... that has the guise of being a really nice fraternity that wants to help the community. And
they've stopped just being Masons now. Like, you could just be a normal person.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't have, no more stone.
You just have to be accepted. And obviously, like we said, not a woman. But anyway, so this guy is going to tell the world about their secrets in this book. He gets jailed by some of the Freemasons in town. And then this guy takes him out of jail, frees him. He's like, oh, thanks, guy. And then takes him to a carriage. Ends up being a Freemason himself. And some other Freemasons jump in there. And all these people hear him screaming. Like, all the people in the neighborhood hear this guy screaming. Like, you're a murderer. Blah. No one ever hears from him again. The police do nothing. You know, at a certain point, I read that it was like a good percentage of the men in America were a part of the Freemasons.
Yeah. Yeah, there were these, and people didn't like the secret societies so much. And
unless you're in it.
Yeah.
Unless you're in a secret society, you hate them.
I think at a certain point, you ended up having, some people to this day say that they were responsible for the French Revolution. That it was kind of like the Illuminati had gotten into the Freemasons, and they influenced events in a way that sparked up that. And it was so believed that England kind of freaked out about it themselves and were starting to do like a ban on secret societies. So, but there were a lot of leaders and kings and like aristocrats in the Freemasons. So they ended up voluntarily having records of the people, and that was enough to make it not a secret society. So these actuals, it became a crime to even be in a secret society.
That makes a lot of sense. And if you think about it, if you are a group of guys, you have no family or anything else, you probably will talk about the politics of the time.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you have a lot more influence when you're getting all this money. Like, what did they need the money for? They probably had like so much money that they were like hoarding. Yeah. Probably like making heirs every like town they go to. You know, getting people pregnant. They didn't have child support back then.
No. You could always deny it.
Yeah, just go to the next town.
You could always just promise. There's no way that someday a baby's going to look so much like you that it becomes irrefutable, right? You know?
Yep. And going back to abortion, maybe that's another reason why they don't want people to be able to choose to not have children. Because people who don't have children have more money, they have more like time to think about like politics and stuff. Just when I was working all the time, you don't have time to know what's going on. I'm sure when you have kids, you come home from work and then you have kids. Like, when do you have time to like really get into the topics of the day?
And that brings us to like the Handmaid's Tale kind of conundrum, that the entire world's birth rate is plummeting. You know, over the years, even the countries that used to have really high rates, they're still reasonably high compared to the West, but they've dropped.
A lot of people can't have kids anymore. Like, a lot of guys are having trouble, and they're saying it's from like the pesticides and stuff that we're eating.
Never know what
like all the stuff that's in our food is basically poison. We're basically like a glorified China at this point with our food sources.
Yeah, it's like a very disappointing moment, I think, when you realize what goes on with food. Because you kind of have this idea that this kind parent, especially if you grow up more like Democrat, you think about the world and like, oh, well, like this nice benevolent government is going to take care of things. And then all of a sudden you realize they're just real liars. And you start realizing what actually gets people to gain weight. And they're telling you to just be sucking down 1,000 carbs.
Oh, yeah. Remember the carbs was the bottom of the
pyramid.
pyramid.
Yeah, you should just
like,
be eating
cereal,
bread. Eat
bread
cereal.
and then also have
Cereal
a lot of
lobby,
milk.
those companies had so much money that they were pushing these politicians to be like, yeah, you need to have Cheerios all day. That's the healthy food. It's just empty.
I don't know if this is 100% true. I need to do
more
like research. But people say that they spray all this pesticides like Roundup on wheat and beans and stuff like that, like a couple days before they harvest them, because it makes them dry out faster and they don't get moldy, and then they can transport them faster. So it's all like to make money. They're spraying poison which dries out the seed, or like whatever, the legume, the bean, the bean.
I love that.
But like, how sick is that you as a producer care only about money? Like, this is bad. Like, there's been a lot of lawsuits at this point that they shouldn't still be doing stuff like that.
Yeah, weird coloring, all this unnecessary.
Yeah, like coloring that comes from like gasoline and like all these horrible things.
And then all of a sudden they banned trans fat. Which I've never.
Apparently, the FDA approved cigarettes for asthma back in the day, so that just tells you like how much you can really trust them.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but also it's like, who else are you going to trust?
That's the whole thing. Yeah.
Like, who else is like Dr. Phil or not Dr. Oz?
I think that's one of the best arguments against, that kind of like completely hands off, because people just pump just crap into things if they could make a profit. Mm-hmm. People cut it and lie about active ingredient size. Yeah. I mean, if for nothing more than like the integrity, like people would half it. It would become the industry standard that people are going to get half an active ingredient without it. So you're always going to have these problems, and for something that's so vital to somebody's health. I can imagine cutting corners on somebody's heart medication.
It just seems like you could make a profit and still do the right thing. No one's asking anybody to be completely altruistic. We're just asking for it to be like not poisoning us at every like turn, like medicine. The water is poisoning us. I was just talking about how like apparently chlorine gets absorbed by us really quickly. So when you have chlorine and you take a shower, all that's being absorbed by you. You go into a swimming pool, all that's being absorbed into you. So just like imagine all of the stuff we put our bodies through. Yeah.
And think about just the electric waves too.
Yeah,
and all these telephone, and this Wi-Fi. It's kind of a joke about like 5G and stuff. Yeah. But there are weird things. If you have, who knows what, 100 years. Just because we can't
see it doesn't mean that things aren't going through our brains. Like, there are waves.
Yeah.
And radiation.
This stuff just
going through the air. We just can't see it.
They had radio waves for this century, but like pretty much before then, like we had nothing. So there's just no long-term studies on how somebody's gonna behave with having a cell phone next to them every minute of every day.
And on top of that, I don't know if I've already said that in another podcast. I'm sorry if I have. But I'm still upset that they didn't tell me about that Moderna hadn't gotten a vaccine approved. Like, I would have still gotten the vaccine. I just wanted one that was safe. And I'm okay with, like, emergencies. You have to get things approved faster. But let's start with the companies that have had things approved, maybe.
Yeah.
Like, wow.
Yeah, it's wild. It is wild that it wasn't just readily in front. And I think that's when you don't get to, like, dialogue online was so shut down just for the word being exposed.
Yeah. Or we weren't allowed to talk about that in Wuhan, China, that they were messing around with the COVID
the gain
virus.
of function.
And now I just saw an article yesterday that there were like reports that there was a major incident at that research facility days before the COVID outbreak. Like, are you going to really tell me it came from a meat market? I feel like that's just like the easy thing to say, like, oh, this market's dirty and it has a bunch of poor people and they eat weird stuff. Like, let's just blame it on that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, for sure. For a few days, if you remember in the beginning, everybody was just so indignant about, be like, ugh, this is just disgusting people.
They're just like nasty people eating like monkeys and
bats
and... No, you know what it is? Some people working in a lab doing stuff they shouldn't be doing, and then it gets loose, and then they blame people. And I'm not saying it's never that, but that's probably where they got the virus from to start with, and then spread it everywhere.
I mean, just stating this fact that you have this crazy version of this SARS virus that originates in bats, and then it gets released. It has its outbreak right next to one of the only labs in the world that is working on a dangerous SARS-2 virus stream. You know, what are the odds that was there? And yeah, for months and months, and then they say, "Oh, that's because you don't want people to be mad at the Asians." I mean, what do you? Should you not say it? Yeah.
Sorry. We'll cut this out.
Would you not say that it was from a lab if you found out that like thousands of Chinese people were going to be killed in America? Like, if America grabbed the pitchforks.
And by lying to the people, all you do is make all those people who are dangerous have something to say. Like, oh yeah, like the government does lie to you. Like, because they do.
It was such I think COVID is so responsible for where we're kind of at in dialogue right now.
Yeah, because we didn't know who to trust, and we trusted the government. And I honestly, with the schools, we didn't really know what to do, I feel like. And like, you can say, oh, it's the Democrats' fault for shutting down schools longer, but you're forcing teachers to go back to work before a lot of people were ready to go back to work.
You're like a frontline worker in that situation.
Yeah, and how do you know, like, the little kids aren't gonna form some new variant that kills them all? Like, that's something you actually do. I feel like you should be cautious. Maybe instead of just whining about how kids are behind, we start doing more summer programs. Like, we stop doing this stupid thing where we have huge amounts of time where kids are going to school and they forget everything.
That's not going to get any
focus less
kids to
on
vote
tests. Focus less on testing and focus more on learning things.
Yeah, you're hearing a lot of people, isn't it? Luckily, it's a global issue. I think that like.
So we're all dumb together.
So yeah, so it's not like one group got to really run away.
I'm glad that we still got the good education.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine. It's so horrible. I did not have lost any years. I can't imagine losing a year or two of your college experience. Well, it's so much fun. You know, you have these 4 years and then more when you're getting master's degrees.
They should give you like 2 years.
I expanded.
After high
it was
school.
so nice. I added 2 more years.
That's what I'm saying. I think that
student.
you should get like 2 years where you have fun, like what they do with the Amish.
And then you get 4.
And then you get to go to college after, like, instead of feeling pressure to jump right into college, because everybody wants to party. You need to get that out of your system, and then you can really focus on school.
See, I had a year between my undergrad and master's, and that was kind of
was your party year?
Yeah, that was my party year, I would say. I wanted to have it at 25. 23. No, 22. 22. It's, at that point, you just kind of want to, I was like, I'm going to just play music and hang out in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And be a hipster. And be like, all right, I should go back to school. I should probably go. You went straight from undergrad to
I think I even went during the summertime.
Wow, you weren't wasting time.
I was trying to run out of the house really fast. And then I also stayed every summer. The first summer I did go home, and my parents didn't want me to go home, so I had to stay with my grandparents. So after that I was like, you know what, I'll just stay in school.
Isn't it silly?
It's fun.
It would have been easier, if I could have done it over again, why not lower your load per semester?
Yeah.
And take the fall and
you can do a whole class in 5 weeks.
And they're so much easier. They give you a lot of benefit of the doubt in those.
You just
classes.
have less people in your class.
Yeah.
You can talk to the teacher more and get more one-on-one time.
Yeah, you just really get pointed in how to do well in it.
You get your hand held the whole time.
Here are the things you have to learn, and it just sinks in better in that kind of I would have these 8 people classes. I loved it. They were the most fun ones that I had during my masters. Yeah. Because I was going to try to get not waste my time doing. I was so done with school at that point. I'm like, I want to be done.
Sometimes I want to go back to school, but then I'm like, not really.
At this point, though, is it that much harder than just doing the essays? We're never we wouldn't, if we went back to school, we wouldn't have to ever take, we would have statistics, maybe. Yeah. But statistics is what it is. It's a cool thing to know, and it's always been fun.
I would just want to make people call me a doctor. It's all for ego. And you know what? I feel like I've done a lot of things to prove that I don't have an ego. And is that just as bad as doing something because you do have an ego? Because I have an ego that I'm a person that doesn't have an ego.
That's your.
So if you think about it, it's the same thing. You should just do what you want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like when I think I see so many people with this ideology of I'm a contrarian.
Yeah, there's no award in life for I tortured myself by not doing what I wanted to do, so I get a badge.
I always thought that was the vital lesson for somebody who's complaining. That it's even if it's so justified, some really negative things have happened, for them, where does it come down? It comes down to that sucks, but you're not going to be able to tell somebody that and you're going to get a great life. You're going to what are you going to tell St. Peter at the gates of heaven? This answer.
It was everyone else's fault.
Yeah, it was everybody else's fault. Be that sucks, but you still you should. It's not a healthy mentality.
No. Yeah. And I have a similar personality to my grandma, who everyone in my family hates. And I've come up with the theory that everyone hates her because she tells people the truth. And the truth is that a lot of people in my family complain, and she just tells them that they could do better if they really wanted to. And people don't want
people get mad.
They don't want you to tell them the truth. They want to feel justified in their misery.
There was my buddy's wife has always I've never been able to really communicate with her that much because she was the type that really talks in complaints, and you have this weird element where it's I'm not going to just go on with it. You hear this story, my boss did this and this. I'm well, it seems like they were probably in the right to do that,
I'm sure she loved that.
And she's you're the same kind of piece of shit CEO. It just turns out thing, but it's just don't tell me these things, and we'll never have the problem, because it's. You have to, at the end of the day, why not be accountable? If nobody else is going to be, you kind of have to be.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, triggering someone or, upsetting someone, eventually they'll, think about it, or, maybe they won't. But you're still, giving them the opportunity to, think about it and be oh, well, maybe they're right, and maybe I wasn't right in this situation.
there's a cathartic feeling to complaining too. I think
Yeah.
that we've had some great complaint sessions over the years in the office where you dealt with clients all day
that's
and
true.
just had a nightmare with the client. It's one thing to have an issue with like your direct boss, but when this large amount of money is hanging over the decision and they're giving you a hell of a time and saying the words to intentionally freak you out more, implying,
That it's your fault.
that it's your fault and they're leaving, and
Yeah.
you have to just laugh it off at some points or like complain about it with each other,
I
like,
think
or else
what we
you go
also
crazy.
did is that we were so like polite on the calls that we almost needed to like talk shit behind doors, like what we wanted to say to them, like, oh, you're a dumb piece of shit, like, don't you know that's just the IPs, or like, don't you know, like, these people are just like giving you the runaround and like telling you bullshit, but since you don't know anything about it, you don't even know that it's bullshit. That's where our main complaints were.
Yeah, for sure. Just trying to deal with working with other companies and just people that work unethically and
Toxic people.
deceptive.
There's a lot of toxic people in the world, so obviously there's going to be toxic clients, toxic bosses, toxic coworkers, because there's so many toxic people.
Yeah, it makes sense. And then you just run into them, and they get a real satisfaction of just seeing you struggle. When
They're miserable, so they need to like make someone else miserable.
And like it was a huge reason I think why both of us left a company was actually just because of one of their clients.
Yeah.
So it's tough with different organizations, the way they're structured. When you're so dependent on one client, you're always a day away from a disaster, and that's why it's so important that you would dedicate time to diversifying and figuring out how to get multiple streams, because to just have one is what's the Damocles hammering of your head. It's such a terrifying prospect, and we see a lot of people just their business is just one.
Yeah.
They're like a subservient just to this one entity. And I mean, then you could just be tortured. That's a recipe for being tortured, because you're going to be stressed.
You depend on them.
And then if they get a whiff of that, then you're in deep trouble. I mean, I'm going to take the opportunity to figure out something. Somebody ran over a fire hydrant, and it started shooting up all the water. I don't get that, like, why that makes it so our water is toxic.
You know what? Did you know? I might have already told you this because I tell you like all my facts. That cruise ships, there's a new cruise ship that recycles the water from the ocean to make drinking water for the whole ship. I don't know if all ships are like this, right?
Yeah, I have heard about.
So please tell me, like, should we really worry about water? Like, if they can just get it from the ocean in a ship, why can't they just do that instead of like a water treatment plant? Why don't we just have like an ocean water treatment plant?
And it seems like when you're really, everybody's afraid of the oceans rising.
Exactly.
That if we could drink this water,
we just solved everything.
They'll
okay?
do it.
We suck up the water.
As the glaciers melt. Yeah.
We fill up all of these places that don't have water. Mm-hmm. Can we just inject it into like the underground water and then just like water table for later?
Imagine Africa being like a Venice.
Oh my gosh. We probably wouldn't even have to, since it's a desert in a lot of areas, we wouldn't even have to get the salt out. We just throw the water on there, like an overfilled pool. You just
that would be sad.
the water out.
And people could just come and swim. And there's like nothing in there that can kill you because it's just a big old thing. That's
the only reason they haven't done that is because it's not worth it for them. Like they could. Like, Elon Musk could do that.
It's better than the tunnels.
Yeah, he just funded, like, Ukraine having like internet and stuff.
I heard he was like saying that he was going to take it away. I wasn't sure.
I think I want to start investing in whatever the machinery is that makes ocean water into drinking water.
Yeah.
That's like the future.
I'll never understand why.
Like, fuck, I don't care about lack of water anymore.
I don't understand why our generation grew up on like this panic about water. That like
it's only rare because they want it to be rare.
That you're just screwed if you gotta do 5 second.
Like, oh, California doesn't have any water, but we've been selling all the water to Dasani and the almond farmers. Like, okay, you didn't think that was gonna happen?
It's wild. That's that kind of oligarchy kind of world where.
Why don't they just get a bunch of dirty water and fill it? The trees with that, like, does it really matter if it's fresh water?
See, government corruption, I think, doesn't matter if everybody's doing well.
Yeah.
You know, at that point, everybody doesn't look too critically at things. But then when the illusion starts to fade,
yeah.
and you stop having these basic elements of the first world that you grew up with, when you kind of see a crumbling infrastructure. And I remember being so surprised when I would see public sector hospitals and nursing homes. My mother worked at the hospital, and we'd visit her, and like you'd see some floors, and it just looked like it was 30 years old. And dirty, and like just like built like floors just blocked off for shit, like a basement full
it's like,
of
here you
nothing.
Go to die.
Yeah,
like those people probably are like, please take me at that point.
And just things breaking off the walls, and it's so sad to see. And that's in probably one of the wealthier areas of the country on Long Island, really? New York. So I mean that's what the hospital look like that. So yeah, you wonder how bad it gets, and as our country kind of faces more issues funding.
That we drop off our elderly like that.
Oh.
Like that we know these areas are just horrible places to put somebody, but we still do it because the other alternative is like us taking care of them. Like we can't do that. Like, how is it that we've come to this point? And I think I was wanting to talk to you about like my last trip to see my grandma and just like the community that's around like these MAGA people and these QAnon people, or like the Baptist Christians and all of this. It makes you like want to join it because they're all like friends. They act like they're so warm to you, and I think we're all like just missing like this connection. And you see this with like gang members, even like they just want like a family, and like this gang member seem like a family member to them.
Yeah. They might not have a father,
Yeah, exactly. Like they might have a messed up home life, so they have like these older guys that take them in, and at first, like they really are like father figures, or like even in this example of being around my grandma, like all of her friends are so cute and nice. Like this old woman, and I'll talk about the Bible study because that was just one of the more like fun times. So we go to this Bible study in this lady's house, and she looks like a tiny nun, but without like the garb, like really short hair, super skinny and little, wearing like oversized like clothes, but like hippie like, and then a huge like necklace with like a wooden cross. So just imagine this, the most bubbly, cute woman ever, and there's chairs everywhere around in this really old house. It has to be like 100 or 200 years old, but just like it looks like a museum, like a really well kept, beautiful, nothing is dirty, like just nice. But it has like a big picture of a woman from Africa in the middle of the prayer, like,
and they're all white.
They're all white, And not just that, I was like, oh, so this woman maybe is like a liberal, and that's still questionable. But maybe she like really does a lot of stuff in Africa, and somebody gave her a painting. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm trying not to judge, but it seemed off in this house.
Yeah.
And so as like the Bible study goes, like everyone seems so nice and so cute, but then they keep saying like homophobic things, and then all of them like get so riled up with each other on these like ideas. Like there's one guy who kind of reminded me of my grandpa. His take on like Luke saying that you're supposed to treat everybody like yourself and, you know, be kind and not judge and all this, as you're supposed to do that, but only to other Christians. Somehow he interpreted it that way. And that, like, maybe after you're done with your people, if you have leftover time, you can help other people, like, try to find God and stuff. But he was focused on this idea that it was, like, just with your brothers, because he said brother. And his interpretation was like, oh, well, if it says brother, then that means like as another Christian.
Yeah, he's trying to justify not wanting Mexicans.
Exactly. Like, it doesn't matter if they're religious or whatever. Like,
a lot of them are Catholic, right?
Yeah, like, it doesn't matter if they even believe like in Jesus, if they're not like your brothers.
Yeah.
Like, the closer people are the ones you worry about. And then maybe like the Catholics. And then after that, like, maybe if you have any cares, like, you could care about, like, a gay person.
Yeah, that's kind of...
a black person who doesn't believe in God.
I guess it's always viewed as, like, a threat, right? That it's a different idea. And different ideas make people fundamentally uncomfortable.
Well, you would think
right?
that, like, in this Bible study of all these nice people, that after this guy was saying this, that they would all disagree, but they did not. They were all like, okay, yeah, I can see, like, what you're saying. Like, they were going along with it. And I think this is, like, the dangerous part of it, because I was like, oh, this is so cute. Like, every time I go to, like, church and stuff, like, I see why old people like it. They're alone, and it gives them a community. Like, they all hang out with each other. If they get sick, you have all these people praying for you, and they come and, like, write you cards and bring you food. Yeah, exactly. But then you have, like, these ideas, like, these sick ideas that are, like, I don't even know, like, people are just so hateful or something. Like, they're, like, using, and I guess if you want to use religion for bad, you can, because it has a lot of, like, room for it.
Yeah, why do you think that they fixate on those kind of, like, negative topics? And that's like, why can't there be one that everybody's just, like, really positive the whole time and don't have to bash, like, a specific group?
I don't think it's just Christianity. I think it's, like, the Christian way of life. So it's, like, non-sexual, like, a life of you restrain yourself, you don't want things too much. And none of these people, mind you, are like that. Like, they're all, like, weird, horny old people who have, like, cheated on their partners when they were younger and all, like, wanted boats. And, you know,
it seems like that doesn't, like, correlate between, like, people who are religious and, like, people who are religious cheat all the time.
But it's convenient because they can just ask for forgiveness.
Yeah.
So, like, that's the caveat.
That's always made me uncomfortable in redemption. In Judaism, there's only one time during Yom Kippur where you, like, kind of suffer. You do the fast for the this or that.
Well, I think because they don't suffer.
You sit through 8 hours of synagogue of suffering. Yeah,
it's that they want us to suffer to be like them. Like, they're like, I don't care if you're, like, want to date women. We want you to not do it because we want you to be in this kind of lifestyle.
Can you imagine now? Let's say you're a 75-year-old guy who got married, right, and had kids, but deep down he wants that dick. And then he sees in a different generation, like, a young woman who's, you know, dating a woman, and he's like, wait.
You're supposed to hate yourself.
You're supposed, yeah, like, what are you doing? That's like, everybody feels like that, but you're not supposed to work on it.
The people
You'd resent
who
it.
had to pay for their college, they're like, I don't want you to get help with your college. Like, I know that it was unfair and I had to really struggle, but you know what? Like, that's part of it.
Yeah. It's like, I always compared it on, to, like, if somebody drowns, then you ought not to save somebody else because it would be unfair to the person who just you couldn't save, of course. So you just got to continue to let people suffer.
Just let everyone die at that point.
Yeah.
So you don't pick favorites.
I think a lot of people do that kind of logic for those kind of forgiveness things.
I think it's more of like, you think when you go through things, you're becoming stronger, and a lot of times, like, we are when we go through like hard times in life, but you're also a lot of times getting bitter, and you care less about like other people's struggles because you're like, well, I went through it and I'm fine.
Yeah.
Or, you know, whatever. Like, you just
sure.
get kind of like hardened by life.
For sure. Yeah. And a lot of it does have to do with, like, I dealt with that, so
I'm unhappy, so I don't care if other people are happy because no one cared if I was happy.
Yeah, it's sad. It's sad, but I've been guilty of that. Well, I'd hear a complaint and kind of be like, you know, somebody not having time or something in their, like, master's program or something. And, you know, I would think to myself, like, geez, like, I did it when I was young. So, like, I probably had, like, the most privileged situation possible. You know, these people are working and trying to figure it out. But, yeah, going through different things, you end up kind of being a jerk to people when you should help them.
But in our environment, we all compete with each other. So, like, when you live... And actually, I was listening to this really interesting lecture from the ones that I sent you. And the guy said, how can we really be like a democracy when our religion is based off of like a king and all of this stuff? And that's so true. Like, you call like God like Lord or like the King of Kings or whatever. Like, we're the servants and we don't question things and you just serve.
The flock, like some dumb little sheep.
Exactly. So if you really believe that, can you really have democracy? If that's like your most like strongly held belief, and the foundation of that is to just believe whatever God says, and by proxy, priests or whoever's in charge of the church, right? So I don't know, like, can you really have democracy? And I think that's why you see it in like the separation of church and state, because they understood that. Yeah,
and now that gets challenged more and more, right?
Yeah.
And you're seeing more and more people think that there should be. Fundamentally, I've always thought, and pro-life people always hate to say this, but like most of the time, they're Christian. Like most, you know, it's always like they try to rationalize it in a different way that's not religious, but you end up, it always ends up back there. I think the way you kind of see life a little bit differently, and they really don't believe. I've seen libertarians who say like no government ever, whatever, we're anarchists and stuff. But like should there be laws that prohibit women from having abortions? Like, of course, because that's a human life. And the rule is that we can't be aggressive to a human life, and that's a human life at that point.
And how come if you kill a pregnant woman, it's not until like a certain time? Like, then we need to change the laws.
And it's like a civil offense against her person.
Yeah. Instead of just going after like pregnant women, why don't they go after just that children are alive at a certain point, and then all the women beaters and stuff would go to jail.
Yeah, I always think about like the argument
for murder.
That like because you can't, because at a certain point I think we all agree that like you shouldn't have an abortion unless there's some kind of complicated factor. at a certain point, so we all get, like, pro-life, pro-choice people, like, everybody gets that, like, at certain points, you're not a person enough. You don't have the personhood or the ability to sense.
Yeah.
So it makes it more acceptable when it's closer to the side, when it's really obvious that that's not a sentient being capable of hearing
And
or feeling
let's just be
or
honest.
celebrating.
For one moment.
Dude.
And fucking act like we care about what's right and wrong. Like, how many laws are there really to protect right and wrong? Like, the way we treat animals and stuff is atrocious. The way we treat women a lot of times is atrocious, or people in the criminal system, or any of these
homeless
things.
people with mental illness.
Exactly. There's homeless people laying around, and what they do, like, cut the wood so that they don't have anywhere to hide.
And make seats that suck.
Yeah.
So that they can't
There's
become
immigrants at the border with children. So what do? Lock up the children. You don't know where they're supposed to go. The kids are getting, like, assaulted and stuff in there. So we're, like, I'm not saying that we shouldn't care about babies, but this whole, like, idea that, like, Americans, that's the number one topic that we should be talking about, when at a certain point, like, you really can't get an abortion. Like, I don't think you can get an abortion when the baby's about to get born. Like, I don't think that if it could survive outside the womb, I don't think that you can actually get an abortion. Like, tell me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But I don't think it works like that.
For the most part, I don't think anybody's really.
If you have a miscarriage and you're 9.5 months pregnant, you're not having a miscarriage, you're having an early birth. Like, that's just like.
I think I was 3 weeks before my due date.
Exactly. So, like, at a certain point, the baby's just gonna come out, because they don't cut up the baby. It's not like, oh, well, we're just gonna chop it up inside you now. Like, that's not how it works.
Yeah, I think they would have like a birth or something, or like a dead birth.
Yeah, like what it usually does is it just makes you have a miscarriage, which people have all the time, and it's not their fault. You know, their bodies just, like, don't hold on to it.
Yeah, and that's why we were talking earlier about why it's so important to have education on these topics, because whether you're on either side of the argument, it's the only thing that really is shown potential at reducing.
Exactly. If there's a bunch of women that are having abortions at, like, 8 months, and a lot of doctors are being disturbed by it, or something's going on, like, maybe we should just bring up those cases and make changes to the laws based off of these bad things happening.
I guess it's a rhetorical approach. Where you
like, it's been illegal. It's been legal for years now. Like, where's all these bad cases that have happened that we need to, like, make changes because of?
Yeah, that there's some sinister doctors out there that's 9 months and they're taking it without any issue,
happening?
just because somebody changed their mind. Yeah, it's just that you argue against that fake point, and you attack that, you attack the sides. I think it's just a way to dishonestly argue.
It's just a way to, like, make people feel bad, like, oh, I have to argue for abortion. Like, nobody really wants to. It's like one of those sad things in life that happen.
You're getting it gets to almost like a comical moral place where you almost feel like defending that, like, you're Satan, because they'll keep going with but you're killing babies.
Yeah.
And you're killing babies, and it's such
like,
a striking accusation.
It's like making it illegal to not make eye contact with homeless people. Is it messed up to not want to look at homeless people, especially, like, if you have a couple dollars in your car or something? Yeah, that's messed up, and maybe that person would die that night. You don't know.
Yeah. I saw this thing where like people aren't allowed to give food.
Yeah,
anymore.
we're not even allowed to feed homeless people. Like, if you have, like, a setup, because there's, like, all these regulations. Like, if you're giving food out, that you have to be sanitary and, like, have all these certifications or something.
That's so wild.
But just think about it, like, you see homeless people and you know that they're not okay, but you don't do anything. Yeah. And that person is alive. Like, how many kids are in the foster system being abused or, like, have nowhere to go because nobody wants them?
Yeah, you would think, like, it doesn't seem like that far-fetched that there would be a society that, like, when somebody was homeless, like, somebody would be like, hey, let me help you out. And, like, come back with me, we'll give you a job doing, like, mowing the lawns.
Isn't that what Jesus was doing, is, like, talking to homeless people?
Mostly, right? Just miscreants. And I don't think, you always hear that Mary Magdalene was, like, a prostitute, but, like, there's nothing.
They just wanted to make her look bad.
They just always, like, he wouldn't have touched her. She had been around so much that... It was nothing.
Yeah, she was just such a sinner that he liked her. He liked really big sinners.
But yeah, that's what's so funny about them getting this kind of completely, like, elitist viewpoint of the Bible and taking from it that you should be extremely judgmental to people on the fringes of society. They read an entire book about a guy who lives on the fringes and talks to the people on the fringes, and then they come out of it hating Jews. And
you know what it was? It was probably that, like, the religion that was around at the time was, like, a lot scarier and whatever. And Jesus's, like, Christianity was, like, a really nice version of religion at the time. At the time, thousands of years ago or whenever it was. And now it's just, like, so outdated, because at the foundation of, like, Judaism, which is Muslim, and Christianity's, like, you know, grandpappy or whatever, is, like, Adam and Eve and all these stories. They're not, like, pro-women.
No.
And they're not, like,
They're coming from societies that are very... Like,
exactly. And there's a lot of stories of, like, chosen people and not chosen people that... you know, are people that get sent off to live with the whoever, savages of the world that are not chosen.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's a lot of, like, if you really look at these stories, like, they're not positive. Like, you might want to take it in a positive way, but it's not, like, a good story. Yeah,
like the story of Abraham. And I think they're all Abrahamic religion. With that, you know, this idea that there's a virtue in, if a God tells you to kill a child, your own child, that it's acceptable and, you know, worth celebrating. And then at the last minute he pulls it and he says, no, it was all a joke. Like,
imagine, like having to serve a God like that. That's scary. Like, if that's what God is, like, I don't know how I feel about it.
Think about that. Yeah, I mean, think about that moment, really. You would have been so distraught at that moment.
Like, what else is he going to do to me?
Yeah, your head probably broken by that point. Because I think he goes home, he's talking and thinking about it, he's not sleeping.
The wife is going to leave him because he's like, I can't believe you're going to kill the kid.
So he must have just been dead inside by the time he was ready to kill this kid. And then all of a sudden, I think he sees, like, a goat or something. He's like, the goat means that I don't have to kill him.
So I can kill the goat instead.
So I can kill the goat, and then they slaughter the goat. So, like, that's...
And there's a lot of, like, blood sacrifices. Can we also talk about that? Like, that's weird.
And then that's
suspicious.
That's suspicious. That ended right with Jesus, I believe. Like
he's a blood sacrifice.
Yeah, and he was the final blood sacrifice. So now we don't have to do anything with the lambs and stuff.
Well, the lambs are happy.
You know, but it's not like, how come at synagogue we don't slaughter our goats anymore?
That's true.
Right? Why did it stop for us too? Because they always say that it stops with Jesus, right? That's always what they say. What the heck are we doing? We're being too reformed. It would be cool if it was like...
they still do the blood sacrifice.
You know, I would like them to be able to take care of it without harming the animal. I don't think you should just slice the throat like they would in the old days and, like, let it bleed out. But if we could have, like, a barbecue every night, every Friday, a nice, like, lamb barbecue.
Well, it's not to God if you're eating it.
Oh. It's so stupid to just waste it then, too.
Yeah, I know. Exactly.
Why does it have to go to waste?
But then, like, the whole, like...
People are so hard. We're make this up, and then it's not even fun.
I
like,
know.
if you're going to make something up, why don't you make up something fun?
It wasn't made for us. It was made for the people who were using it to control us.
Yeah.
And that's just the reality. But the thing is, like, I've realized the other side of it, like, this whole science... And you feel like you're just, like, an anomaly, and you're just, like, floating in space, and your life is kind of, like, purposeless. Yeah. That's not good either.
That was a really popular vibe for, like, college time to me. Yeah. I hope that I see less of, like, that new atheist kind of thing. It was so popular for a while with, like, Dawkins and Hitchens and Sam Harris. Like, all those guys have kind of faded.
I mean, they might have a point in that the religions we have now are not, like, as correct as what people act like they are.
It's just when it goes to this full-fledged, like...
There's nothing
rationality, nothing, nihilism. It doesn't have to always go there, but it so often does. And I think people have a better understanding of even kind of, like, the humanism... feel, these ideas that don't really have a deity, but there's some religiosity thrown there that's, like, more popular. A lot more spiritual people, I think, now. There was a real point where it was a complete, like, pushback from the religious 90s.
And I think that it's justified because you see all these, like, sex abuse cases, and even, like, what I was talking about with the church groups and how politics has seeped into there. I think that happens a lot because it's, like, the original law book. It's the original government.
Yeah, when we were saying the other day that my like, the church that my brother went to and his wife, that they just found themselves going to because it was the one that was the closest. I mean, it's 2 or 3 minute drive south, and just going, and it got labeled a hate group. Because it's so intense.
I should have turned in my grandma's church when they were talking about gay people all the time. They would have definitely gotten it.
You think that they crossed?
Yeah, I got offended.
What were they saying?
Basically that, like, choosing to be, like, gay and stuff, like, is not something that you can just pray and, like, be forgiven for. It's like choosing to, like, live in a way that
it's like if you were killing somebody every day.
Almost. Like, it's like choosing to, like, not live in a godly way.
Yeah.
Just, like, taking it a lot more seriously than, like, a lot of churches have started to take it. Or, like, they were starting to get a little more laxed.
Yeah.
I feel.
I knew somebody who went to the Church of the Glades, which is, like, a pretty, like, progressive church. And even they couldn't say that it wasn't in, like, in an ungodly way.
Yeah,
gay relationships. They're gonna dance around it a little bit, but, like, some places might not. But, like, it's commonly
they're always like, yeah, it's a sin, but you know what? Yeah. We're all sinners. I sin. Yeah. You just existing is a sin.
Yeah.
So that might be a little bit more than my sins. However, Jesus died for us all. Amen.
That is the exact take on it. Be like, listen, your life is a sin. But I guess we all sin, and things work out, Try to do your best.
My whole thing is, though, it's like, if you've ever watched Survivor, they form these alliances. Yeah. And at first, like, the alliance is pretty big. But, like, once that alliance has, like, really dominated, they have to start picking off their own. And I feel like with Democrats, we're less, like, united, but we're also less, like, gonna pick off one or the other. Like, we all want to still be in the same party. Whereas, like, with Christianity and stuff, they want you if you're against liberals. But if there weren't liberals, then they probably wouldn't want those. They'd be against those people. Mm-hmm. And it's like, there always has to be somebody that they're against.
Yeah, it increases the inward connection.
Yeah.
In group dynamics, that the existence of this external other is
I don't
very
think there
important
ever is, like, an end game there, where I feel like maybe with liberals and stuff, there is more just because there's not like this so strongly held belief in like this God or deity or whatever that they're going to church every Sunday about.
Yeah, and I guess that's, like, if you had to sum it up, that like the liberal dream, and it is something that there would be a society where no matter what race or color or sexual orientation or religion somebody is, that they would have a fair shake.
Yeah, they don't want to be visually or verbally like attacked. And I think the Republicans now are like, oh, we're after you, like saying it, where a lot of times before it was like more hush hush. Like, oh no, we're all friends. But like obviously they're against you, like with the whole Clinton crime bill, like destroyed a lot of black communities. But all the people like voted for Clinton, remember?
Yeah.
All the black people.
Yeah, it's more of a rhetorical thing, I suppose.
It's more of like to like have somebody even go to that point where they hate you so much that they can't even like hide it, that they just hate you so much that they're like, yeah, I hate you.
Well, you saw so many people really just like really going for the point of like, oh geez, like Kanye was right because he's getting canceled. And like that's such a, and like it's like an acceptable thing to say.
He is right. It's like the if then statements in philosophy.
And I love, like, I just think that I respect him for standing up and saying something that's not popular and be like, so, but are you impressed every time a skinhead talks?
Yeah,
like when a Nazi
should we just
is
have
going
like
on?
Crazy people go on TV and say things just because it's crazy?
That's not a virtue. If you have a Nazi and he's going on, the Jews control this, we're going to war against the Jews. Like that's not commendable, but it's commendable when you're a celebrity.
I think we need to get to the point where we're like, even if the Jews do control everything, like, they don't deserve to die. Like, isn't that, like, a point? Like, there's so many rich people. Does Jeff Bezos deserve to die?
Like, most Polish people, or most sausage makers are probably, like, Polish. You know, so just because they're disproportionate, like, people get into...
people, but,
people get into different professions. The only place the Jews are in America are in the the North, California, Florida, Miami. There are towns, I didn't realize this growing up in New York, but there are towns where they've never even heard of a Jewish person. There's just there's a real movement and like a quickness to when thoughts go popular. I keep hearing people say and like defending this idea that like it's super negative when a social media company stops having somebody on it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, information really does spread. So everybody understands that you want to get your word out there to spread your ideology. If you're if you're political in any way, you're super happy when there's people that are saying what you're saying on television. And then they're popular, of course. So that's the nature of the game. So the idea that all of a sudden you would be like, well, these negative thoughts or negative, rhetoric isn't going to influence people if it's out there.
Not getting me canceled anymore if I join this group wherever they're all saying it.
And then the idea that a company would have to platform and amplify hateful speech is like that's a ridiculously authoritative thing.
Did you see on Twitter, like, as soon as like Elon Musk took over, like they kept saying like the N-word a bunch and stuff?
Oh, and my feed is just like, Kanye was right. Kanye was right. N-word. It's wild.
People are such children. Like, at the end of the day, like, and it goes back with like, you don't know what you are unless you have somebody to debate with. And I feel like the cancel culture did get a little bit out of control, like where I come from a very rural area. Like, I would do anything that I felt like would help the majority of people or, like a minority if it is being like held back in some way. Like, I would want to help it. But am prone to saying dumb stuff that I don't know is ignorant until somebody tells me, and I would just hope that people would tell me in like a kind-ish way, you know, and not just like cancel me. And if I was a celebrity, like that would be intimidating.
Yeah, for sure. I could understand that. Yeah, you think like everybody thinks that they're a good person and like
but
understands
sometimes you say
it.
things that don't sound so good when it comes out of your mouth,
especially when you're young. You know, you might not even realize like how you might think that you're super progressive, and you're so limited. Like we were saying, sometimes you don't even have exposure to different groups or different ideas, and then you're interpreting something for the first time, and it gets confusing. So, I think that there's something to just moderation, and like we get so like political.
Slight moderation, because when you overdo it, then it pushes the other side to like want to push more.
Yeah, you wonder if that increases like the violent.
I feel like it does. Like if people feel controlled, they're like, well, fuck you, like I want to be even worse. And I think
we definitely have seen
like
that, right?
People, and even people in the middle might feel like how I feel, like they aren't liberal enough to be on that side, so they are better to just like be in the middle when maybe they would be more on the left, but they feel like unheard. And I think when you're a kid and stuff, you just don't realize that people are not on the same level as you. It's like theory of minds is not fully developed.
Yeah, that this is a whole identity, and they're gonna be thinking
like other things happen in life, and then you like even. I used to be like a burn it down socialist, and now I'm not anymore, because the thing is like people's retirements and stuff are based off of a lot of these companies. So even if they're doing things wrong, you're gonna cause so much hurt if we really like do drastic things. I think a lot of things need to be done slowly and like thoughtfully, so that we don't hurt anybody, but we like rebuild a better system.
Yeah, there's a social net is needed. I think for society to really say that it's
for businesses and for people, because businesses are a lot harder to like run than what people realize.
Yeah,
even I realized,
and they don't make it easy.
No,
nobody makes it easy. That's when it gets frustrating. Like I think for like somebody who works a job. And then they critique the government for taxes and stuff. If you're running your own company, you should see what we get. You should see the treatment that we receive. Yeah. Like you're talking about you're giving up, you're getting your nice couple of thousand or few thousand at the year when it comes tax time. You're pumped about tax season. You're going to go do something and book a trip. Yeah. Nope. Just another time for the fourth time that year that you got to give them more money and file everything, and maybe find out that you got to spend a little bit more money to get out of it.
Exactly.
And that's just for the pleasure of doing business in the United States. And even in our business, it's not like we use streets. Like I could literally be in a closet.
I pay for everything that I use.
So, the idea that, like the Obama sentiment, like, you didn't build that. And I guess we use the internet lines.
I pay a lot for internet.
Yeah, so we pay.
I pay a lot for the internet that campaigner uses to send out my emails.
Yeah, that's true. And then they probably have a tax on that they got to pay, so that's going to up that, from their pricing. Has to include like a tax on it to optimize their money.
I don't want to know how much taxes I have to pay this year.